Christ is risen from the dead. We are one with him again. Come awake, come awake, come and rise up from the grave.
I think one of the things I love about Jewish culture is this notion of what it means to remember. And it's probably just Mediterranean, Middle Eastern culture in general, but there's something very specific in the Old Testament when the Jews and God remember their relationship. God remembers his covenant with them. And basically the way that God remembers is that he recalls the promises that he's made as if he just made them. You know, I think for us as human beings, we promise to do things, and sometimes that level of commitment kind of fades over time. And so when in the Old Testament, when it would say, God remember us, or God remembered Noah and spared him from the flood, or God remembered Abraham, and God remembers this person, remembers that person. David in the Psalm says, Lord, remember us. There's this immediacy once again to the relationship. And I share that because here we are, we're journeying through this week towards Good Friday and towards the cross, and we enter into Jesus' passion through the Passover. It's this Jewish feast every year they celebrate where they remember that God spared them as the angel of the Lord passed over Egypt. And they were spared because the blood of a lamb was marked on their doorway. And so they would come together every year and they celebrate this Passover, and they remember that God spared them, literally as if it just happened that night. And during this Passover meal, and they sing songs and they tell stories and they talk about how God has saved his people, Jesus picks up a cup of wine and says, looks at all his disciples and says, do this, drink this. This is the blood of the new covenant. And this is after he's taken bread, unleavened bread, and he's looked at them all intently, and he says, this is my body, which will be broken for you. And then he takes wine, he says, this is my cup, which is the cup of the new blood covenant. I shall not drink it again until I inherit the kingdom. And then he says these words, do this in remembrance of me. And I think that over 2,000 years, a lot of theology is developed out of those specific words. And what was he really trying to say and mean? And because it's important. I think at the heart of it all, despite all the theological differences we have, I think that all Christians can agree upon this one thing, that in that moment, what Jesus is saying is, he's saying, there are moments in your life, specifically when you come together to worship, that you are called to remember me, in the sense of we need to be one together again. We need to have a moment of communion where there's no separation between us and God. And it's a moment of intimacy, just like it was for Christ. And from that moment, we are fed and nourished and are sent, and in a particular way, through communion and through remembering the Lord's Supper, we get to have a deeper understanding of what Jesus entered into for his passion. And so I encourage you, as you reflect on the Last Supper and you hear these readings, to allow yourself not to just think fond thoughts of God as if you think fondly of a friend, but to remember God as he remembers you, literally to be one with him in the new covenant that he has made for you.